You eat clean, you take the fancy probiotics that everyone swears by, and you still feel bloated, wired, exhausted. Well, my guest today says that because we've been thinking about the gut completely wrong, we're kind of swapping one pill after another when actually it's more about the living ecosystem. And here's the part that matters most for our show: that ecosystem has been quietly running your mood, your stress, and your sleep. Welcome to the True Wellness Podcast with Dr. Z, where we explore what it takes to live with vitality, balance, and purpose. I am Dr. Z, and each week I will bring you powerful tools, inspiring stories, and expert insights to help you thrive in every area of your life. From health and wellness to mindset and navigating life's challenges, this podcast is your guide to creating a life of true well-being. Now, let's get started. On this show, we talk all the time about the mind-body connection, and few places where that connection is more real or more overlooked than the gut. And my guest today is uniquely built to talk about it. Dr. Oscar Coetzee has spent more than 25 years working literally at the crossroad of psychology and nutrition. He's got a master's degree in both, a PhD in holistic nutrition, and a doctorate in clinical nutrition. He's also held faculty positions at Georgetown Medical School, Notre Dame, the University of Bridgeport, and he is considered a pioneer in nutritional science with deep expertise in metabolic health, chronic inflammation, and of course, gut permeability. And what many of us know as leaky gut, you've heard the term. So today we're getting into why so much of that standard gut advice quietly fails us and what actually works. So Dr. Oscar Coetzee, welcome to our show.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah, so you come at this, gut health from a rare combination, like psychology and nutrition. Now, on our show, we do a lot of talking about the nervous system. We do a lot of talk about stress. So what did understanding the gut teach you about the mind, right? And how real is this gut-brain conversation that people may have heard about?
Yeah, that's a wide question, but we'll start with the basics of maybe how I got to investigate what I'm investigating from a mental perspective.
Yes.
So I started my career as a psychologist. I worked at Fair Oaks Hospital in Summit, New Jersey, with drug and alcohol counseling, suicide intervention, and codependency counseling. Those were kind of my areas of specialization. And at that point, I just finished my master's and I was doing kind of an internship. And there was a medical doctor there by the name of Dr. Mark Gold, who was a psychiatrist and way, way ahead of his time. He told us as the new intern group, hey, you guys might want to consider at some point investigating a nutritional connection to mental health, because nobody's really looking at it, but it's quite obvious, when you have certain vitamins and mineral deficiencies. And at that point, I was like, yeah, I'm still going to pursue my PhD in psychology. And then at some point, in the middle of that, my mom got ill. And that's where the whole holistic integrative medical approach to me came about. And, in the middle of about a 2-year ordeal investigating my mom's disease and obstacles, I was like, wow, he was right. There's definitely something connected here. And that's kind of where my whole mindset shifted. So today when I go and speak at mental health conferences or whatever, I'll just tell people that mental health has a 3-pronged bar stool effect, in my opinion. So there's one side, the one leg is psychiatry. I do believe there is a space for psychiatry. I think we may be a little overprescriptive with some of the psychiatric medications, and that's just my opinion. But
Mine too.
there is a place for it, right? And then the second component of that would be, psychotherapy, social work, talking to somebody about your problems. I think it has value, but the most overlooked part of mental health is all the things that could potentially connect us to anxiety and depression from what we're eating and what we don't have as far as nutrients are concerned. And I'll give you a couple of small examples. I'm sure your listeners are pretty familiar with it, but the things that I want to do is I have a checklist. So I have people, okay, check your vitamin D level. That has a direct connection to your mental health status.
Yes.
Check your iron level. You want to know if you're anemic. Anemia plays a very, very important role in the formation of thyroid hormone. If people have hypothyroid, they end up being more anxious and depressed. So we want to check the iron. We want to check your blood sugar. We want to make sure that you're not hypoglycemic and your blood sugar is going up and down, because that could sometimes mimic the instigation of something that people perceive as a panic attack when it's really just a hypoglycemic attack, because there's very similar symptomology. Now, I'm not saying that they are 100% the same thing. I'm just saying that at baseline, you need to look at people's blood sugar, their vitamin status, and then their microbial status, right? You kind of want to
Yes.
get an idea of what's going on in the gut, because these bacteria in our gut make these amino acids or proteins that help us make neurotransmitters, right? Like tryptophan and tyrosine that people are probably familiar with.
Hmm.
So I just kind of went down that journey. And now when I work with people on the mental health component, I will clearly check all these things. I'll do a lot of functional testing to see if there's early indicators of nutritional insufficiencies, and then do gut investigation to understand which of these microbes that make these things that make us happy are they lacking, or do they not have. So I know that's a long-winded answer, but just as a base, for people to understand.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what I hear you saying is like we need to start to look at things differently, right? We need to shift our paradigm from, okay, there's just counseling, there's just medication, but we need to take a look at what's happening with nutrients, because at at the end of the day, and this is what I always say, right? If our body doesn't have what it needs, then it's going to do the next best thing that it can to keep us alive and survive. So if that means that we are in a space where we're going to be depressed or we're going to have anxiety, well, that's less important to our body than whether or not, our heart's beating, and so it's got to do the best it can with what it has. That's one of the things I call it is a survival debt, right? It's the debt for what we have that our body needs to survive. And gosh, we might not like the way it looks, but it's going to show up. So a lot of our listeners have probably heard that, well, your gut can play a role in your mood. And how exactly is that? Can you walk us through some of the mechanisms that exist that play a role? Why is it
Sure.
why is that? Because
Yeah, so let's just start at the top. So a lot of people automatically assume that, the stomach is the thing that has everything to do with digestion. Really doesn't. The stomach is really just a disseminator or a blender, right? That makes things to be like a pea soup, and then it gets to the microbiome where the real job starts happening.
yes.
So these microbes in your gut are then the ones that are extracting the iron, and they're extracting the B vitamins or making the B vitamins, and they're extracting all these other things that you need to make a consistent mental health base or foundation. So if you don't have the amount of good bacteria, and I don't really like using that word, I'll explain that a little bit later. If you don't have enough of these commensal strains of bacteria that synergistically work with us, then you're not going to extract the amount of nutrients that you want. And you made a very, very good point a couple of minutes ago. I'm like you. I 100% believe that the human body wakes up every day to survive, right? It has no
Yes.
interest in dying. The cells want to be alive, but they
Yeah.
can only do the amount of work that you provide them the fuel that they need to do it. So if your
Exactly.
heart needs a ton of vitamins and minerals to make itself work, it's going to sacrifice happiness or mental health for that. So let's use an example. If the heart needs vitamin B6 for any particular reason, and your brain needs vitamin B6 to convert these proteins to happy
Mhm.
chemicals, the body is going to say, hey, look, I need the heart to pump, man. I don't have enough B6 to send up there. So I'm just going to send it all to the heart in
yeah.
very baseline explanation. And sorry, you're going to be sad. So the whole idea behind the microbiome is to make sure that you have enough diversity. You have enough of these different microbes that play a role in a cohesive ecosystem to help you disseminate and break down these nutrients. And then they produce byproducts that we clearly use, right? And before we get to another discussion, I just want to really delineate here between probiotics of different kinds. Okay. Now, I
Yes.
am not one person to argue and say that probiotics that are out there today do not have an effect on mental health. Some of my research students have done massive publications on that and peer review investigations where we found that if a person is taking lactobacillus or bifidobacterium, they do improve anxiety and depression. The only problem with those kinds of probiotics is that they're transient, right? They
Mm,
don't really embed and they don't really grow in the gut when you stop taking them. They do
yes.
have pixie dust potential. So they're going to send signaling that's going to help this whole process, but they don't get in there and work really complete magic by regrowing. So this whole idea that people think that you can just take a standard aerobic probiotic, meaning they need oxygen and just going to fix your gut is a complete
Right.
misconception.
Right.
Then there's a complete other side, right? There's an anaerobic bacteria category. And these anaerobic bacteria, I want the listeners to think more of them like an organ system, not like bacteria. I want you to think there's certain strains of bacteria in your gut that act more like a kidney or a heart or a liver. And that's how important they are. Now, the problem with those kinds of bacteria, up until very recently, they haven't been available in supplement form because they're anaerobic, meaning that they don't like oxygen, and it's very difficult to develop probiotics that don't get exposed to oxygen, right? So those are the ones that really will set the foundation of
Hmm.
better breaking down and communication, but that doesn't exclude the value of the other probiotics when you're taking them from a benefit standpoint.
Sure. Well, let's kind of go down that rabbit hole there a little bit, because I think people, when I see clients all the time and they're like, "Oh, I'm taking my probiotics every day," and people seem to think that all probiotics are equal because it says probiotics on the bottle. It's the same thing. And you know, you and I know that's not really the case, but it's not promoted that way, on
No,
TikTok or Instagram or whatever social media channel is promoting the next best thing. So probiotics are really important, but I think it's also important for our listeners to understand that it probiotics are not one thing. There are many, many, many different kinds of probiotics, and different probiotics are needed for different circumstances that are happening. So can you dive into that a little bit more?
yeah, I think when people look at the magic bullet probiotic, right, and the more we dig into this, and let me just make it clear to all the listeners, we are only now starting to really understand, right?
Yes.
I mean, we had no concept before, and even the understanding that we have up until this point is probably minute to where we're going to be in 20 or 30 years from now.
Sure.
But our understanding was also, hey, I'm going to throw this probiotic in, and that's all of a sudden going to help all the other ones. Please understand that these microbes have been around the world much longer than we have, right? So
Yes.
these strains of bacteria have been in other animals, they live in plants, they're everywhere, right? So they have figured out how to work together.
Yes.
So you might find what people call an opportunistic bacteria, which would be deemed as a bad guy for some people, but
Right.
it really
Right.
isn't,
Right.
because it actually helps some of the good guys to get what they need.
Sure.
So what we're really starting to understand is that you kind of want to give it the real baseline so that these guys can start working together, because the one is producing a byproduct that the other one needs to produce something that you need, and then they produce something that the other one needs. So this cross feeding is the real word for it, is really where the understanding of the probiotics come in. So please also understand that the traditional probiotics that we get today, like your lactobacillus or your bifidobacterium species or whatever, they normally not from human origin, right? They normally come from a fermentation process or a dairy
Yeah.
product or something else to that effect. What I'm talking about is the modern probiotic or the next gen probiotic is going to have a human origin, not a fecal microbial transplant, but a human origin. And then that's going to work better in your body because it was extracted from a community of microbes in a person's gut, put in your gut, and they've lived in that environment. They didn't live in a plant environment or a soil environment. And that's really important to understand, because clearly, if you put something in a puzzle and the puzzle fits perfectly, it's going to be a lot better than doing it upside down, and you don't see the real colors of it. So the analogy that I'm trying to make here is these particular forms of probiotics are systemically in our bodies. They do a lot of mental health, and I can get really complicated with naming some of them for you if you want. And they've been around forever, but we
Yes.
now discover that without those,
Yes.
there's systemic association to major depressive disorder or anxiety disorder or diabetes or non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. They have so many connections. It's not just, it's almost like these microbes are the base of chronic disease regulation rather
Mm.
than just something that's going to give you, a little bit of happiness for a short period of time.
Yeah, well, that goes back to the saying, right? All disease begins in the gut. So it's like if we don't have that proper colonization, then we're headed down a pathway.
Correct.
And there's so many different reasons why that happens, and we can get into that in a little while, of course, right? Like how the gut becomes disrupted and how we end up heading down this path where everything becomes you know disrupted, because the truth is I do believe that our bodies, like when we're born, ideally, now we know we can go down the other rabbit hole that moms are not as healthy as they are, and the whole we know even the birth process, right? So if a baby is born from a vaginal birth versus a c-section, like if you're born via c-section, you're now missing some of that important colonization that occurs with a vaginal birth. So you're already starting kind of one step behind that you need to work on moving forward. But let's take one step back, because I think this is important. So we know what you've said is there's a basic foundation of probiotic bacteria that belongs in the gut. Well, people will say like, hey, I've taken a probiotic and I felt nothing lasting, right? And then they're like, I give up, I'm not taking any more probiotics. But can you talk about the difference between like a probiotic and then like prebiotics?
Sure. Yeah, there's obviously a huge difference, right? The prebiotics are normally deemed the things that keep the probiotics happy, or the
Mm-hmm.
bacteria happy. These are the food sources of the
Yes.
actual bacteria in the gut. So if you look at major depressive disorder or anxiety in the world from a statistical analytical standpoint, it's increased profoundly, right, over the
Sure.
last couple of
Yeah.
years. And it's not because it's just a genetic thing, right? I mean, we didn't just change our genes the last 20 years. All of a sudden now we have the genes for major depressive disorder. You might have had those
Right.
genes for the last 2,000 years in your family line. It's just that they didn't come to fruition because your microbes were doing the job to compensate or override that bad genetic aspect. So the
Yes.
prebiotics and the fiber association and polyphenols, the colors, the reds, the greens, the yellows, the pinks, and the purples that we used to eat that we don't eat anymore, is really the profound reasoning behind why these things are so low. So it's really important to get these prebiotics back into the system and these colors and fiber, because there's a direct, not an indirect, there's a direct connection in the literature between low polyphenol intake, low fiber intake, and depression and anxiety. And that's
Mm.
interesting, right? So in countries where the fiber intake is higher, there's less
Yes.
anxiety and depression. There's
Yes.
also a lot less other conditions. And let me just take one step back, because you mentioned something really interesting. You said, okay, so why are we in this position? Why don't we have these microbes that we used to have? And it's
Yes.
really simple, right? I mean, we're taking more proton pump inhibitors or stomach acid medication than we've ever
Right.
done as a community. That destroys them. Okay.
Yes.
Antibiotic use completely destroys them.
Yes.
Glyphosate, I'm sure most of your listeners have heard about glyphosate, an herbicide, a pesticide like Roundup that's sprayed
Yes.
on all foods, completely rips them apart.
Yeah.
Then the fact that we're not eating a diverse seasonal diet anymore is a major problem. The average
Mm-hmm.
American is eating 16 grams of fiber. In order to have proper development of microbes in your gut, you need to be eating between 35 and 50, right? And nobody
Right.
is really doing that.
Right.
In addition to this, all this approach to, well, I have such a big gut problem, I'm going to go on a FODMAP diet, or I'm going to go on an elimination diet. I know that helps the symptoms, but it's actually driving the problem worse,
Sure.
because you're not getting enough diversity in there, to reestablish the foundation. And
Yes.
then the final component of why we are in the situation that we're in is because we've become so sterile, right? We don't put our hands in the soil anymore and put it in our mouths and play with a dog. We're always washing our hands. So
Yes.
those are the reasons that these anaerobic strains of bacteria have completely dissipated. And I will just add one more thing. If we go 500 years ago, you will find that humans in their guts had things called protists, spelled Protist,
Yes.
and sometimes helminths, which are like wormy like things, right? Now, I know it sounds disgusting, but please take in consideration that in countries where people still have these protists and helminths, which are like low level wormy kind of things, there's no autoimmune disease in those
Right.
communities, and there's hardly any eczema or skin conditions.
Yes.
So the reason that we became so sterilized and we pulled all those worms and those protists out, it left a gap. And now that gap is being filled in by fungal overgrowth and all these opportunistic, nasty bacteria that produce histamine. And that makes the situation worse. And that's why we're in the position that we're in. So, in the research that we've been looking at, we found that one of the best ways to get these guys back is to put these old chiefs back in place because they are the regulators of everything in the gut. So, if you reinstitute these microbes in the gut, they seem to communicate to all the other ones to do their job better. So that even the probiotic that you're taking is not going to bloat you as much anymore because these other ones
Right.
are working together with the strains that you're taking. And that's, by the way, the other reason that people get so bloated sometimes when they take probiotics is
Or
because that space is filled up with a lot of bacteria that's now feeding off what you're bringing into the gut and causing extra byproducts that could be irritating the gut.
yeah. So there's a couple things I hear, right? So number one, we've got to bring these back in. But number two, we've got to go back to some of the basics of correcting what we're doing with our diet. Like
Yeah,
all comes back to the diet. All comes back to the vegetables.
true. It's very true. Look, the interesting thing that we found though is that if you look at the research and people are taking supplemental fiber and they're eating better, it doesn't necessarily bring these guys back. You almost need to give them a little bit of a shock therapy, like you would give
Sure.
somebody a resuscitation. But then when you're eating the colors and the fiber and the Mediterranean kind of approach, and you're very diverse and you keep it seasonally, they'll live off that and they'll be extremely happy. So this is one probiotic where, like you say, the choice of what you're going to be eating is going to be the key factor in those things engrafting or seeding themselves so that
Yes.
they can then take care of themselves. That's the beauty about these kinds of strains of probiotics. It's not, hey, you got to be it on the rest of your life every day.
Right.
You plant it in there, you change the diet, the ecosystem starts to improve, and it's amazing how they crowd out the bad guys without using any antimicrobials. So I really think that we're on top of something for the first time ever that is really going to do the gut health thing for
Mm.
this chronic disease, or all diseases start in the gut. They start really with these very particular microbes.
Yeah, I always say there's more of them than there's actually of us within our body,
Yes,
isn't there?
correct,
we're
correct.
we're more not us.
Oh yeah, I mean they far outperform you. That's why I always tell people, it's like when they tell me it's a gut brain thing. No, no, the gut is literally the brain. Okay, the gut is
Right,
literally the thing that is
right.
telling your brain what to do. And you were talking about babies and breastfeeding and vaginal birth, right? A
Yes.
little earlier. Here's an interesting factoid for you, that the bacteria in the womb, or the bacteria in the mom, is actually connecting with the bacteria in the womb. People think it's super sterile, it isn't. And then it's actually connecting to receptors in the fetus's brain. The baby's brain literally has receptors that recognizes byproducts from bacteria to develop its own brain. That's
It's
pretty
amazing.
phenomenal, right?
Yeah.
So that's not stuff that we looked at before because all bacteria is bad. No, literally the development of the brain depends on the bacteria level of the mom's gut at
Yeah.
conception and during pregnancy.
It's amazing that the human body is amazing. And like you said before, we're just at the tip of the iceberg. We we
No,
know we know like this much of about goodness knows we don't even know what we don't know, amount of knowledge and information and all of these different bacteria and the way they're all communicating. And gosh, it's pretty phenomenal. So you talk about treating gut repair as like an ecosystem challenge rather than just a single strain or a single product decision. So what's the difference? Tell us what you mean by that, and why does that kind of reframing, why does it change everything?
Well, because our approach up until this point as a holistic community, or integrative medical community has always been we perceiving that we are repopulating the gut by giving a person a probiotic or telling them to eat more fiber. It's the same thing as a muscle. Like if you don't use a muscle, it's going to go away, right? You're going to have just
Sure.
kind of a flabby arm. So don't expect because you're doing 2 pull-ups or a little bit of weight that tomorrow the muscle's going to be big.
Right.
You
Right.
need
Not
to
happening.
stimulate that scenario because your gut ecosystem with all the temperature and the pH, it's now driven these guys out. So the guys that are living there, they don't want to move out.
Mm-hmm.
They like, no, this is our house now. So now you come in there and you give this little irritation, right? You're putting in this probiotic that's the guy's like, whoa, wait a minute. What are you doing here? You're not supposed to be here, right?
Yeah.
You need to do it persistently with these very specific microbes so that you can retrain that muscle so that
Mm-hmm.
it can become big again. So that's the problem that we've had, right? We've not done the complex thing, right? We've done these isolated thing. This one is good for
Right.
anxiety. This bacteria is good for skin conditions. Yeah, that's true, but you've not reshaped the area at all. Let me give your listeners the best analogy that I can on this. Okay, so if you go
Yes.
out to a field and that field has been kind of barren, right? It's not really looking good. The first thing that comes up are weeds, right? So weeds
Mm-hmm.
will come out of the ground and they will be overgrowing the whole area. Now, that doesn't make weeds bad. That
Yes.
makes weeds actually the first line of defense. So the weeds are coming up because the weeds are trying to change the soil to
Mm-hmm.
make the environment better, right? So if you have a lot of bacterial overgrowth in your gut, and some of them are opportunistic, it doesn't mean that you want to go in there and kill them because they are just trying to help to reestablish the balance, to crowd out most of the bad guys. Now, what we've seen, pretend now that I'm bringing a very powerful seed to the soil where the weeds are, but I'm not going to kill the weeds. I'm just going
Right.
to put these seeds
No
down.
roundup.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I'm not using Roundup. I'm just going to use these seeds and I'm going to put them down. Then I'm going to put fertilizer down. Then I'm going to water them. And then these seeds are going to sprout. And they're going to sprout so aggressively that they're going to crowd out the weeds.
Mm-hmm.
And now I have this healthy environment. Doesn't mean that there's not going to be a weed every now and then. Like on a healthy lawn, you're going to see a weed every now and then,
Yes.
right? And that's generally the area of the lawn that requires a little bit more of a pH change.
Yes.
So that's the whole concept. And when we looked at the associations between flora or plant life and our gut life, and we looked at the microbes, they were the same, right? They were the
Mm.
same things that work together to get this healthy environment in the gut. So this is why the collaborative effect of reinstituting these microbes is a lot more important than just one. Because remember, the seed that I put down there is not just a seed for one plant. It's a seed for, let's say, 33 or 40 that are coming
Right.
out. They're crowding out all the other ones. But this fertilizer and the water of this is going to come from you as the person eating colors, more fiber. That's the fertilizer and water. The seed is just the very particular probiotics that go into the gut lining.
Right. Right. So let's talk about some of the different probiotics because I mean, there's there's a plethora
Yeah.
of different kinds of probiotics. Let's talk about the basic foundation. What are some of the probiotics that everyone needs to make sure that they're having, right? In addition to having all of their fiber, I love my salad with my sauerkraut, real live probiotics there and all the fiber with it. But walk us through some of that.
Okay, so again, I just want to distinguish. There's two kinds of probiotics, even though there's millions of them, right? There's two
Yes.
kinds. There's aerobic transient
Yeah.
probiotics, and then there's anaerobic uh, engrafting
Right.
probiotics. Okay. So if we distinguish between those two categories, the ones that you really need in your gut by name would be a bacterial strain called Roseberia.
Hmm.
There's a bacterial strain called Akkermansia, which I'm sure everybody has heard of.
That's big in
There's
the
a,
GLP-1 world now.
yeah, exactly, and I'll explain to you why that is. So the Akkermansia, the Roseberia, and then something called, very complicated name, and I'm going to run it by him, but I'm going to give you a little acronym for it, right? So it's Faecalibacterium prausnitzii. We just call it FPROW. So you have Akkermansia, FPROW, Roseberia, and another very complicated one called Anaerostipes. So
Yeah,
those four strains of probiotics, right, or bacteria, let's just call them bacteria because they're not necessarily a probiotic, but you
sure.
can get them now. But those strains of bacteria regulate 85% of the expression of your immune and metabolic health. This
Wow.
is why Akkermansia got such a big name, because Akkermansia actually produces short chain fatty acids, which is the byproduct that the bacteria makes in your gut from eating your food, right?
Yes.
And then they give you these short chain fatty acids and they express little receptors on the gut lining. So let's just pretend that these bacteria, what they produce, have fingers and they can just go push the buttons. I'm going to push the button for your immune system. I'm going to push the button for natural GLP-1 production.
Yes.
So it's not Akkermansia that's actually making GLP-1s. It's the byproduct of Akkermansia that
Yeah.
is expressing or pressing the button on your keyboard in your gut lining that is then making the GLP-1. So we are all, as humans, able to make natural GLP-1s in our guts at about 6 places. So this brings the whole GLP-1 discussion into the equation as well.
Yes.
Maybe we should just kind of go back to more endogenous or natural production of GLP-1 rather than just relying on this one-shot wonder, to make that work. Not that I'm saying there isn't a
Side
place for that,
effects.
but not the way we're doing it, right? It's concerning to me.
Yeah.
We don't know the long-term consequences of using these things.
No, we don't. Yeah.
Yeah. So does that make sense? The two differentiations there between the
Yes.
two for you? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So those are the four that we need to be on the lookout for because they're having the biggest impact. And then we need to also make sure that we're taking care of those guys via our diet, our fiber, and what kind of role does stress play in all of this?
Huge. So just for the listeners, it's not like you're going to know by looking down your throat with a camera, whether you have those
Right.
bacteria. The best way to investigate that is to go see a functional doc or a nutritionist or a person like yourself that has experience in this field, and they can do a stool test, like a functional stool test
Yes.
from a lab, right? And
Yes.
these functional stool tests are not there to measure disease, they're there to measure optimal health. These ones, they
Yes.
can tell you, hey, Joanne, Marianne, Melissa, you've got low FPROW, you've got low
Yes.
Akkermansia, you've got low Roseberia. Once you have one of those three out of the equation, literally the answer to the problem is not to take a single strain, it's to take a combination of all of those strains
Right.
because they know how to self-regulate the one that's up and the
Right.
one that's down. You
Yes.
know. So I think I skipped one part of your question. Can you just repeat what you asked me 2 seconds prior?
So we're talking about how stress plays a role
Well,
in all of
yeah.
your gut health.
So stress is an interesting thing, right? This is also a topic that we could probably go deep into for hours. So I want everybody to understand that stress is actually a very natural part of health, right?
Yes.
If you don't have stress, your heart can't pump. If you don't have stress, your kidneys can't work, right? So I want to differentiate between three different kinds of stress. Okay,
Yes.
so then maybe the listeners can get a better understanding. So there's stress, the word stress, that is natural for us for survival. It's like a car that you're burning out the oil, but the car is running.
Sure.
There's sacrifice, right? So that's
Yes.
stress. Then there's distress. Distress is
Mm,
when we are putting the body at a higher burn rate than what we're taking in. So if we're
right.
not eating enough nutrients, but we're overtraining or we have a lot of financial stress, or we have marital or relationship stress, or whatever, any kind of stress is going to burn your energy pathways to deal with the issue. So your body is going to use more glucose. Your body is going to use more vitamin D. Your body is going to use more vitamin C. I just want people to understand that psychological stress is a major driver of nutritional insufficiencies, because
Right.
you're putting your engine in high revving mode, but
Yes.
you're only taking some of that in. So that's
Yes.
distress. Okay, so we know
Mhm.
that distress could be psychological, it could be physiological, it could be anything related to PTSD related stuff. All the psychological trauma related things fall into that category, but
Right.
also just every one of the people that are exercising 7 days a week and never taking a day break, right? I mean, that's another form of stress that's in
Sure.
a distress state. And then
Sure.
on the way opposite side of the spectrum, we have something called ear stress, spelled EU stress, all one
Hmm.
word. Distress,
Yep.
stress, and ear stress. And ear stress is that really overexcited, overstimulated stress that we have. And how do we make that? Look, if we get really excited, a wedding, that's why they tell you it's so stressful, buying a new house.
All
So
right.
that's ear stress. You're excited, but it's, man, the financial stuff. And so your body is also in that hyper burn. So
Sure.
what we found in research is that ear stress and distress has the same effect. Whether you're overexcited or kind of depressed, you're burning out the same amount of energy in your body that now throws the balance off. And this is something that is way back in scientific literature, written by a guy by the name of Dr. Hans Selye. And you could literally go buy a book for like $5 on Amazon, where Dr. Selye wrote, and every one of the listeners can read this. It's like 74 pages. The book's name is Stress Without Distress.
Mm.
Brilliant. I mean, it completely explains it to you in a very logical way, so you understand why, hey, maybe if I do deep breathing or yoga or go walk my dog or play with a dog, how that can offset, some of
Right.
the ear stress or the distress, or just eating healthier
Yes.
also puts you more in a stress category, not in a distress and an ear stress category. So I think it's really important for people to understand that every day you wake up and everybody's talking about cortisol. Cortisol's bad. No, cortisol's good.
Part of
Okay,
the
cortisol's
cycle.
supposed to be up in the morning, but
Right.
if you consistently have the cortisol high, you're running your engine too hot, and at some point it's going to burn out. So it's really important just to understand the balance and the yin and the yang, of
Yes.
maintaining that ear stress distress balance. You can't be void of stress; you'll be dead.
Right.
Like
Right.
avoidance of stress is death.
Right. Exactly. There's a there's actually a really good I used to teach at Hofstra, and one of the required assignments for my students was to watch it's a TEDx talk by Kelly McConigal on stress. Have you seen it?
No, no.
Go look at it. But it's really great. Basically, the gist of it is, we've got to rethink stress,
Yeah,
because stress is a normal part of life, and not all stress is necessarily bad, right? And I mean, you talk about people are, we're biohacking in saunas and cold plunges. Well, literally what we're doing is we're putting our body under a stress
stress.
state. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So
Exactly.
so stress isn't necessarily the bad thing. The word itself doesn't mean it, but I think it's what we do and how we operate, what our perception is. Because two people, you and I, we could have completely same circumstances in our lives, and then our perspective around it makes a difference in how our body perceives it. And then if we
100%.
if we take that a step further, it's not just our perspective, but our perspective is also shaped by the state of our body, right? If we haven't slept all night, that little tiny thing is going to like throw us off the wall. If we have a great night's sleep, that thing is like, no big deal. It now doesn't have that impact. So there's so many different things that contribute to the stress itself.
That's such an interesting statement to make, because it's so true, right?
Yeah.
Riding a motorcycle for one person could be the most stressful and scary thing in the world, and for another person, it's the most relaxing thing in the world. Take the danger
Yes.
concept out of the equation. That's literally what it is. For one
Yes.
person, skiing down a mountain is relaxing. For another person, it's like, oh my goodness, I'm so stressed out, I'm going to break my foot, my neck. And then that's the guy that breaks his foot, right? Is the one
Yes.
that's stressing out about it, not the one that isn't stressing out about it. So you're 100% correct.
Yes.
Um, but from a stress standpoint, and I think one of the main reasons, and this is my own hypothesis at this point, but one of
Sure.
the main reasons I think we are so stressed out is because we don't have the foundation of these microbes that really
Yeah.
regulate a lot of what's going on with digestion and assimilation. So if
Right.
the listeners walk away with one thing, understand that the microbes in your gut, and very specific ones, are extremely important at
Yes.
regulating digestion and absorption. Without digestion and absorption, you are going to be anxious, you are going to be nervous, you are going to show signs of depression. And I'm not talking
Yes.
about sexual abuse or
Right.
PTSD from a war zone,
Right.
but that also depletes nutrients because you're consistently in that state. I'm talking about the people that are walking around with dysthemia, mild depressive disorders, mild
Sure.
anxiety, but they just can't explain where it's coming from.
Right.
That is not, in my opinion, something that needs 6 months of psychotherapy to figure out. Just check your
Right.
vitamin D, check your iron, check your microbes, see where you lie on
Right.
those.
It's funny, in my practice, I take a very back to basics approach. And honestly, for 17 years, I practiced in the state of New York as a functional medicine practitioner. And you probably are aware, like New York, when it comes to lab work and everything like
Oh,
that, New York's getting better, but it's traditionally the state of no's. And so I recognize that a lot of functional medicine practitioners, require a lot of lab work and this, that, and the other. And I've always been like, well, that's really interesting because you know what, we can deal with, 90% of what people have going on by addressing those basic foundational things. And I always tell people your gut, your digestion and your minerals, if we have to hone down, like someone has issues with supplements and they need to manage that or something, your digestion and your minerals, those are the two key priority things in my book.
foundational,
Yeah.
100% foundational, right? You're not going to build a house on sand. You can build the fanciest house, but if it's on sand, it's worthless, right? You need the foundation. And
Right.
I'm not saying all the other components isn't nice to look at, but you better get the foundation to be able to stabilize next to the ocean, not just build something on the sand. And that's exactly what you're saying, right?
Yeah.
And I couldn't agree with you more. I just want to say this to the listeners: and if your age demographic is 40 to 65, it's kind of falling, right into the era where I grew up.
Yes.
When we were growing up, and maybe the listeners can attest to this, it's like nobody had a food allergy or a food
Right.
sensitivity. Uh,
Right.
I can't remember going to school with anybody with a peanut problem or
Yes.
whatever. And
Yeah.
now you can't even walk into a school with a peanut T-shirt. Right? I mean, it really is a big issue, and the reason for that is the microbiome. It's not
Yes.
like we have gone away from it. And why does the microbiome get so affected? Because a lot of these foods, it's not the peanut, it's not necessarily probably always the grain stuff, and we can get into that because there's pros and cons to both sides of that
Sure.
discussion. But it's probably what it's sprayed with.
Right.
The herbicides and the pesticides that are on these foods that are breaking down our microbes. Now they can't break down the food anymore because you've killed them, but you still have the food in there, and that's creating bloating and distension.
Yes.
So like you say, if you can get a person over time to be able to eat again, not just 5, 6 foods because they're allergic or sensitive to all the other
Right.
ones, and you're going to react initially, right? You are going to be bloated, but if you don't test and you don't go get microbes, literally the only way that you can fix your gut is over time make your body more resilient to more foods that you can eat in more seasonal capacity.
Right.
And yes, I do believe at that point there will be progress. I always tell that to my students, and maybe you, because you've taught as well. I said to them, listen, this industry is kind of a cheat system, right? Don't tell everybody everything too quickly, because you could literally fix just about 90% of problem in this country by having them eat real food. Like that's it. That's
End of
literally all you
story.
need to do,
End
right?
of story. That's it. Yeah, eat real food.
Yeah.
But people struggle with it today because you walk into the grocery store and there's not a lot of whole real food in there, unfortunately, right? And
Yeah.
we as a society have come to trust, well, if it's in the grocery store, then it's safe to eat. Why can't we eat it? But it's, most of what's in there is processed food. So yeah, if we could just eat real food, a lot of the problems sort of go away, don't they?
I'm glad to see, though, I'm starting to see a little bit of a rejuvenation and some of the younger people being more into the farmers market stuff. So I'm encouraged by that,
Yes.
but we certainly had a population where the TV dinner started,
Yeah.
and then it fed more into, I can remember as a kid going out for fast food was a treat because it was expensive.
Right.
Now fast food is super inexpensive, and good food is super cheap. I grew up in South Africa where, um, I can remember just eating real food and literally every Friday night, my mom was like, okay, we're going to go out to Wimpy, which is like a McDonald's. And that was a big deal. He's like
Right.
going to go have a hamburger and fries. But the difference is in those days, the hamburgers and the fries were from one potato and made in tallow, and they were from one real beef thing, and there was no glyphosate spray. So even the
Right.
burger was of better quality. Now I don't want to sound like the old dude that's talking about the past, but that's literally the base of it, because the more young generation has more gut problems than the baby boomers have, right?
Yeah.
And the reason for that is because most of us, when we grew up, were given a foundation of microbes because of vaginal birth, breastfeeding, more whole food eating than most of the younger generation. This is why
Right.
we see the level of food sensitivities. That
Right.
is the real cause of it.
Right. 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 Well, let's dive into the word leaky gut because it's a
Okay.
word that gets thrown around a lot. Let's I'm not sure people really understand it. So, in plain language, what is intestinal permeability? How does chronic stress, chronic illness, how does that all play a role with intestinal permeability? Leaky
Okay. So look at leaky gut, because this whole thing is my gut is leaky. Everybody's gut has to be somewhat leaky, otherwise you're never going to get a nutrient in. You can't
gut.
create a gate that is completely sealed, then you'll starve to death. Okay, so
Yes.
please understand, and I don't know if my listeners can see my hands in the presentation, but basically if I take my two fists, and where my thumbs are is the inside of the gut, and where my pinky is right now is the bloodstream, right?
Yeah. So
So
for those of you who are listening by
yeah,
audio only, right? Just imagine having two fists brought together.
yeah, and your knuckles are kind of intertwined like a puzzle, right?
Right.
Okay, so these things are now your gut lining. So you eat and digest, and there's really intelligence between the bacteria and your immune system. So the bacteria sends a signal that taps on this little skin wall of yours, and then it says, "Hey, open up slightly. I want to send some B12 and some proteins down," and then it
Yes.
closes again. Okay, now that's in a healthy environment. Now, if the environment isn't healthy and there's a lot of other crappy kind of microbes around and that communication is lost, then these gates stay open longer. Doesn't mean that they don't close at all. They just stay open longer. And
Right.
now toxins and chemicals can get into the bloodstream that now upsets the immune system, saying,
Yes.
why are you sending all these guys in? I just wanted the nutrients. I didn't want the toxin and the chemical and the artificial sweetener. I didn't want that stuff. Can you just keep that
Right.
up? Sorry, the guard's not at the gate, so we're gonna be. So how you fix the gates and how you get those knuckles to be intertwined and only close and open very slightly is to have the right bacteria in, because they are the guards. They are the
Mm,
guards of these particular gates. And these bacteria that I mentioned earlier, those complicated names, they are really more involved with the gatekeeping aspect of it. So if you
yeah.
low in those microbes, your gates, you have an open border, and it's just going to send all sorts of things across there that you potentially don't want.
Yes, and I'll make sure, just so everyone knows, I'll put those listed in the show notes, so everyone's like, "What was that?" and "How on
Yeah,
earth do you
yeah,
spell that?" So we'll go
yeah.
ahead and put that in the show notes. And Dr. Oscar does work for Designs for Health, so I'm assuming you have a product that has those in it. I'll put a link for that in the show notes as well,
Sure.
so if people want to go ahead and grab that, they can for
Yeah,
sure.
and literally, if they go on the website and they put one of those fancy names in, that
It'll show
information
up.
will come up and they can go read on it. And I certainly appreciate that and respect the fact that you don't want to have brand names and stuff. I'm
Yes.
literally talking about the microbes as the important component, because
Yeah,
that's what the
absolutely.
scientific literature is literally showing. And I don't know how much time we have, but I would love to tell you just a little story about the unique interaction discovery that we found from those microbes.
Yeah,
Because
go for it. Go for it.
okay. So Let's quickly throw them again. So Roseberia, just remember it as rose, like a rose. Okay, so
Uh-huh.
we'll have that one. Faecalibacterium prausnitzia, let's just call that F-Prau for our discussion. Akkermansia, and then there's some Bifidobacterium species. So there's 5 strains, and we have another single strain. But the 5 strains, this is how they work. So the rose one, the Roseberia one, is literally the bacteria that has a little tail on the back of it. It's called the flagella. So it's got this bacteria and a little tail. And then that little tail goes to touch your gut lining. Literally just goes in there and touches it. Just to show you the intelligence of this, okay? And then the gut lining is like, I know that bacteria. That bacteria tells me to make hypoxic environment, meaning
Mm.
when that tail touches, it sends a signal to say, all right, we're getting rid of oxygen. So now what happens? All the bad guys that live in the oxygen environment are now going to die and be crowded out
Yes.
because you brought this one in. So
Yes.
that's why that strain is in the formulation, because we
Yeah.
want to create that hypoxic state. Okay.
Sure.
Now, Faecalibacterium prausnitzia, or F-Prau, is a beautiful one. And this is where we can tie it into the mental health. I can tie it into skin conditions. And people that have low F-Prau are more prone to having colorectal cancer. That's well documented in the literature. People with low F-Prau are more prone to have major depressive disorder. Well
Yes.
documented in the literature. So F-Prau is another unique one. F-Prau is a unique design, and what it does is regulates pH. And I'm sure that most people have heard about pH. It's acidic or alkaline. So
Yes.
it creates the perfect environment for anaerobic bacteria, because not only do they need no oxygen, they also need the right level of acidity
Yes.
to be able to. So that's what F-Prau does. But one thing that I discovered when I was looking at the research in F-Prau is that it actually produces a very complicated acid. It's called shikimic acid. Now I'm going to
Mhm.
explain this.
Yes.
All bacteria in the gut have something called a shikimate pathway. You don't have it. Humans don't have it. All plants have it, and bacteria have it.
Right.
What the shikimate pathway makes are the proteins that make tryptophan, which everybody knows, and tyrosine. So the
Right.
bacteria in your gut make the tryptophan and the tyrosine that you can produce dopamine and serotonin.
Yes.
So F-Prau is the one that feeds all the bacteria the acid that they need to reactivate the pathway. And the
Right.
things that killing that pathway is glyphosate, herbicide, and pesticide. So now
Yes.
you have the cause and the fix.
Yes.
And then the Akkermansia, I'm sure everybody knows that's your natural GLP-1. It helps you with blood sugar regulation. It helps you with weight loss. It helps you with satiety. It helps you with all sorts of immune function. And then
Yes.
2 other ingredients, although it's just very unique Bifidobacterium strains. And their main job is to grab foods and ferment them to feed the others. So you can see that you have a chef in the kitchen, you have somebody that's regulating the pH, you have somebody that's regulating the environment. That's why it works, because you bring a
Right.
community in to change it. Now your ancestral dormant bacteria that have been hiding in the caves can come out and say, oh goodness, we can come out and play again. Thank you for allowing us to do it.
And it's the combination of them all working together that actually makes the
Correct.
difference. It's the synergy.
Correct.
Yeah.
And
And then of course your fiber and your phytonutrients to keep them alive and going.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because in the research that we've been looking at, if you add fiber to the strain, or
Yes.
you add just colors like greens and reds to the
Yes.
strain, it excites them extremely. So it's almost like they're more potent. So this is one probiotic that you will take with fiber, with food, not
Yes.
away, because there's that
Right.
whole discussion where you're not
Right.
away. This, you want to eat it with food, because
Yes.
they get super happy when you give them additional resources by the time they get down there to do their job.
Yeah, well, food provides our building blocks. We've just got to bring the right stuff in. I always tell everybody, depending on what clients have, sometimes, we use a fair amount of supplements in our protocols because we're kind of dealing
Yeah.
with, acute things in our practice, and we want to be effective and efficient, and we want to deal with it as fast as possible. But I always tell everyone, you can't supplement your way out of a poor diet, right? Your health is
No,
not just going to change
no.
by taking this fancy protocol of supplements that I developed for you. No, you've got to eat the right foods along with that. Otherwise, you're just, you're just kind of throwing money down the toilet bowl.
All this supplement is literally a seed, right? You
Yeah.
you can take this seed and go plant it in your bad environment soil. If you
Yes.
don't fertilize it, if you don't give it water, that seed's going to die.
Yeah,
So you're
exactly.
100% correct. Probably the biggest component of this is how you change your diet and how you stick to it. But
Yes.
if you put the seed in, it'll obnoxiously crowd out some of the bad things. And that is the thing that really surprised me the most, because we're just about ready to do some publications on this. And we didn't set out to, all we wanted to show was there's a potential to move Akkermansia and FPROW because of the importance of what they do.
Right.
What we found out is that they not only 100% of the time move the needle on those things, but they crowd out the bad guys without an
Mm.
antimicrobial or without an antibiotic. That was the most profound thing that I saw. And then I just thought, but this is so logical, right?
Yes.
Because we're creating an environment where we're physically choking them to death, right? They don't have oxygen.
Right.
So they're
Right.
going to die. And isn't
Yeah.
that just like, wow, that's all the complicated science behind it. And it's just as simple as, put a low oxygen in there. It's just silly.
Well, it's funny because I mean, I even think about different conditions, gut conditions, where they're like, "Hey, we're just going to give you antibiotics, and you know what? You're going to take those antibiotics for like months." And it's like, well, why would you do that, right? Like, there's another way. There's just totally another way. But that's sort of what
Yeah.
is happening out there in the world. Speaking of which, because everyone, a lot of times people hear the word antibiotics and they're like, oh, probiotics, and they pair those together. So can you talk a little bit about the impact on antibiotics on the gut microbiome? I know, especially with my clients, I'm always like, hey, there's a sinus infection or things like that. There are ways that we can manage these in a way that will take care of the infection without automatically needing to reach for that antibiotic.
So is the question, should you be taking probiotics during the time of an antibiotic if you're forced to take an antibiotic, or just
Yeah,
generally?
well, I guess so. We can start with antibiotics. They do a really great job of just wiping everything out.
Yeah, they do a great job of that, but I don't know how good that is. But okay, yeah, for sure. Yeah. Um,
So where do you go from there?
well, look, again, we're early stage, and I can't sit here and say, well, we're going to make antibiotics obsolete. Believe me, the pharmaceutical industry will not allow us to make,
Right.
antibiotics obsolete. All I'm saying is that we are starting to see that there's an intelligence in the microbiome that can kill bad guys better than we can. And
Mm.
they do that selectively
Hmm.
by starving them, but also providing an option of growth. Remember, every time that you take an antibiotic, you're killing the bad guys, and maybe there's a reason for that. And sometimes
Sure.
there's an
Sometimes it's
absolute need
necessary.
for it, right?
Yeah.
But remember, as soon as you kill something, you're opening up a field that's empty.
Yes.
And a lot of bacteria are antibiotic resistant. A lot of the bad guys are antibiotic resistant, C.
Right.
diff being one. They're going to move into that open field. So you better have other soldiers there to make sure that they don't move in. This is where the
Yes.
whole discussion is, well, should I take probiotics during? Well, the antibiotic is probably theoretically going to kill some of those guys, but at least you're putting something in there. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? That's creating some form of a buffer. Um, a lot of these anaerobic strains are extremely sensitive to antibiotics, so it's probably not the best time to take them during an antibiotic treatment. But I think maybe over time we're going to be seeing less and less. And remember, apart from an antibiotic, sometimes there's antimicrobials that you can take that are
Sure.
more selective in the nuking or the expensive destruction that they create. Things like wormwood or black walnut or
Yes.
garlic or berberine,
Yes.
more natural things could also have that. So I'd probably go down that road first,
Yeah.
but a lot of clearly what we're dealing with today is this long-term antibiotic use, right? I mean,
Right.
they just literally go in there and rip it apart. And
Yes.
they don't. So they literally go in there and put garbage on a piece of lawn and leave it there. Don't care. It's spraying. It's literally spraying an antibacterial on your lawn,
Yes.
right? And then you wonder, why is my grass dying? Well, you killed it.
Yes.
Doesn't mean that the grass is not going to come back, but the grass is going to come back with weeds first,
Right.
and then the other. So I just say, let's just try and mediate that by putting the proper foundation back in there again.
Yeah. I love that. Well, this has been a fantastic interview. I am so glad that you've been here with us, Dr. Oscar, to share your expertise, to share the things that you're seeing out in the research, out in the field, and tell everyone a little bit more about where they can find you. And of course, we'll have everything in the show notes as well.
Yeah, so if you want information on what I was talking about, you can just go to designsforhealth.com and put in any of these strains, and the product information will come up. But I think the most important thing that you could look for there is something called a patient education sheet, and it will give you kind of an explanation of what I talked about here today in layman's explanation. So that's probably the best way to find it. You can find the product with most practitioners like yourself if you have an account, or
Yes.
people that have full script accounts, or people you can even get it on Amazon.
Do not ever buy supplements on Amazon. We're gonna say no to that one, Dr. Oscar. I'm not gonna let that one fly.
We strictly regulate the involvement with that because of the quality control, as you know. I'm
terrible.
Always I'm always very pertinent on getting people with this kind of stuff in front of people like you. They got to be in front of a practitioner that knows what they're doing, and I mean, by all means, I'm not the most excited about that either, but it's the reality of the world, right?
Yeah, unfortunately, I've done a lot of testing of supplements that come from Amazon, because every now and again our clients will say, "Oh, I got it off of Amazon," but the process that things go through at Amazon, they get scanned so many times that
Really?
product then actually becomes, I mean, because everything is energetic. So going through being scanned 100 times actually impacts that product. So you're not getting the same product that hasn't gone through that 100 scans. So it's pretty interesting. That, and of course, we know Amazon
is a phenomenal take, and thank you for sharing that, because even if you have that product in its original form and it's not a copy, from a foreign, strange country,
the other problem, right?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Those microbes will get affected by the radiation and the aspect of that. So 100%.
Never. I tell my clients, never buy a food or a supplement product off of Amazon. You want your dog collar, or
something that you don't eat. You mean
something that you don't eat? Go for it, but nothing that goes into your body because it's altered. But anyhow, we'll make sure that we have that link in there for you. And thank you so much for being here, and continue doing the work that you're doing. And this microbiome stuff is going to continue to get pretty exciting, I think, as we continue learning more and more of the little scratch of the iceberg that we've started to see.
Thanks for your time as well, and thanks for your listeners for sitting through this. It's always good to learn. I think it's really important to know this stuff because, in my opinion, and I've been around this block a little bit, this is literally the way to work a little bit on natural longevity and reversing chronic diseases, the base of the gut. You've got to go there. Nothing else matters.
Yeah, it doesn't matter how many times you cold plunge or sauna or do whatever other crazy biohack thing, the foundations still matter.
Nope, 100%. It's literally like buying a car without an engine and wondering why it's not driving. Silly. Well, thanks so much.
All right, everyone. We'll see you next time for True Wellness with Dr. Z. This is Dr. Z. This is Dr. Z, reminding you to tune into your body, connect with what matters, and embrace your journey to true wellness. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share this with someone who's ready to redefine their health. Let's keep redefining wellness and empowering change together. See you for the next episode.